Okay, all right, here we go. I guess we're live. I'm just.
Okay, all right.
Yep.
I guess we're live.
Let me mute this.
Okay.
Sorry about the echo. Well, welcome. This is my first stream. I'm just trying to get things set up here for the first time. But what we're going to be doing is using the three, it used to be two, and we'll talk about that in a second. The three identity services engine, and I'm logged into a DevNet sandbox iteration of this. So there isn't a whole lot of data in here or endpoints, but the APIs are still there, and we'll be able to get some stuff done. So originally there was the monitoring and troubleshooting MNT APIs, which still return XML, extensible markup language, as their format. So that's one of the APIs, and that's monitoring and troubleshooting. So that's an important API, even though it's kind of legacy. So we're going to make, and the other API is the external RESTful API, ERS, and that's JavaScript object notation, JSON. And that's in the original offering as a REST API, as opposed to an XML API, which is still RESTful, but not, it doesn't return JSON. And we'll have to deal with that tonight. And external RESTful is a subset, like it's pretty good, and we'll explore it a bit. But as of 3.1 ISE, which is the version I'm running, right, the new hamburger menus and stuff, and it's 3.1, there's a new set of APIs, open APIs, with a Swagger UI that again return JavaScript object notation. And there's a lot more of those, and they seem to be a little more valuable to us as consumers and operators of ISE. So most people think of ISE as this. I have to click menus and do things in the GUI. So I'm going to show you tonight that with these APIs, we can actually use it more like a chunk of compute that we can automate against in both directions. Now tonight, I'm going to be just retrieving information. I don't want to say just, but I'm not posting or putting or patching. I'm not sending data other than my GET requests, and then I get the payload back. Now I have some tabs open, and that's sort of my ISE introduction. If you don't know much about ISE, it's for identity services. Now, not just a MAC address, which can be spoofed quite easily, but a certified with a PKI certificate, the identity of the device, be it a device on the network or a human being on the network. Now, I'm very good with ISE. I'm very familiar with ISE. I started with 1.4. We deployed a stack of ISE with different roles and different nodes, and we deployed wired and wireless 802.1x. We had map lists, extensive map lists. We had a fully baked operational ISE stack, all the way from 1.4 all the way through to 3.1. I sort of started using on my own to explore these APIs. So I'm fairly confident and comfortable speaking about ISE. I'm not quite the expert, and what sort of inspired me to do this project tonight, I've done this. There is a project that I have called Brain Freeze with a logo and everything that will make mind maps, markdown files that you can render as mind maps called mark maps from these APIs. I've already done that work. I've also already done the business ready aspect of the CSV files, the HTML data tables, which we'll explore. But I wanted to pull it all together into a nice, concise ISE package. And I'm likely going to call it Brain Freeze again. On my GitHub, I'll have to call it Brain Freeze 2.0. But what I want to do is make it where you can pip install Brain Freeze, and let's make sure the name is available. So this is pypi.org, and I am in the chat too. So if you're watching, just drop where you're from in the world, say hi. I'd love to know who's out there, and hopefully you get something out of this. But PyPy is where I want to host this package I'm writing so that other people can pip install it. So if we look at my Netbox gift wrap project, and if I view it instead of managing it, this is what it looks like for you if you visit pypi.org project netbox gift wrap. I'm going to hopefully have project Brain Freeze, and you can just copy this and pip install it into your virtual environment, which we'll also explore. So that's the goal for tonight. And how do I do this? I use a Python packaging and dependency management system made easy, and it is easy, called Poetry. Now, Poetry has enabled me to do this hosting on PyPy, and we're going to go through that, but much, much more, and we're going to explore that. It is very, very easy to get going. I'm certainly not a Python expert. My Python is advanced beginner, I'll say, but that's why I write Python, is to get better at my Python. So that's what we're doing tonight. But this system, if you have code you want to make available and you're wondering how it's done, we're going to explore it tonight on how to package up this Python code I'm writing with Poetry. Now, Poetry, and you're going to see this, uses a Toml file, Tom's obvious minimal language. And it's funny, this is one of the few acronyms that the M doesn't stand for markup or markdown. It's minimal. Now, you can see how minimal this is. This is a Toml document. We have to write or edit a Toml file to help publish this on PyPy. So that's also something we're going to be exploring if Toml is new to you. And I might have to add Toml to my list of business-ready files. This is interesting to me. I'm going to have to explore that, but not tonight. So then I'm also going to use this package called Rich Click. Again, a Python package for creating beautiful command line interfaces. And that's exactly what I want to do, is make it where you can just type brain freeze and either pass it parameters or just answer a simple menu system of questions that will then give you the business-ready documents. So we're going to be using Rich Click as one of our dependencies in this Python package we're going to run. Now, before I get too far ahead of myself, let's make sure that there is no other package called, there is a brain freeze. I'm going to need a new name. It's an SQL Alchemy plugin. Well, that's a shame. What about Icicle? There we go. Ice Cycle or Icicle. That's going to have to be our project's name. Unfortunately, brain freeze is taken. So first thing I'm going to do is go into my GitHub repository, or my GitHub, and go to my repositories and do a new repository, and we're going to call this Ice Cycle, and we're going to say business ready documents from Cisco Identity Services Engine. This is public. We're going to add a README, which we'll probably not get to tonight. I'll probably write the README on my own time. No git ignore, and let's make this general public, create repository. And we're going to clone this repo into Ubuntu. And I want to put all my cards in the table. Over here in my other monitor here, hey, thanks for joining, Steven. It's great to see you on the stream. Thanks for joining me. Hey, thanks for joining. So I want to be honest and open, like all my cards on the table. I have repositories that, again, I mentioned them. I have a project called Netbox Gift Wrap, which does the Netbox source of truth, open source software. And I met Jeremy Stretch, and I got to meet Jordan at Cisco Live. It was really nice to connect with them, and I just couldn't stop babbling about this Netbox gift wrap. But I'm going to be looking at that code, and I'm also going to be looking at my business ready code, because I've done so much of this work already. But I could easily just copy and paste it all in and be done pretty quickly and wrap this up. But I thought I would just try to write the code by referencing the code and explaining sort of my process. Now, let me clone that in here. What I want to say is that I've found a repeatable pattern. Okay, so that's the key to all of this, is that I've found a repeatable pattern, and almost like a formula, almost like a protocol, where I don't care what the API is. If I can get either XML if I have to deal with it, or JavaScript object notation as the payload from my HTTP GET, we can use Jinja 2 templating and do whatever we want. And you're going to see that. We're going to do, and sometimes not even Jinja 2 templating. I'm going to show you how you can get that payload and transform it into what I like to think are business ready enterprise ready, things you can use, and we're gonna hopefully look at some of that tonight. So my repository is cloned. I'm gonna change into ISE cycle and launch VS Code. And I'm not used to working in this resolution. I've set it so that it's big enough that you can see my code on the screen. But I gotta be honest with you, I'm not typically used to working in this resolution. So I may be a little fumbly at times, or I may have to scale some things. So anyway, so what we're going to do is make a new virtual environment. So Python 3, v, and we're gonna just call this identity. Sorry, wrong dash there. I got ahead of myself. Okay, so now source identity bin activate, and as you can see, so if you're wondering what I've done there, let me clear the screen. I made him boo-boo, but we're going to use Python 3-m venv and then the name of the folder we want to instantiate or create as our virtual environment. Now, a virtual environment lets me install certain packages in isolation from my main operating system or from other virtual environments. I have a ton of them with different versions of different things installed. So I'm going to create that, and then my next command is source, the folder or the name of the folder that you specified, bin activate. And you know that you're in your virtual environment when you see it in front of your prompt here. Okay, so now the first thing I'm going to pip install is poetry. Pip install. Now this is what we want, is to make a package that we can pip install and people can use, right? Pip install icicle. So pip install poetry, and this is going to collect poetry. And is this ever fast compared? I used to have to sit and wait for all of this stuff. This is incredible to be with you. Thank you for joining me. I've wanted to do this for a long time. So now that poetry is installed, we're going to make a new package, and I'll show you how easy this is, like a new project, a poetry project. So we say poetry new, and we're going to call it icicle. Poetry, I'm not in the right folder. CD icicle. Let me do that again. Sorry, I didn't realize. So now it has created the package. After I created my virtual environment, I forgot to change back into icicle. So now I'm in the folder poetry new icicle, and it created this package for icicle in icicle. And that's going to be the first thing that I change. Now, again, I'm not claiming to be a poetry expert. I'm going to show you how I use it and the success I've been able to find with it. So I hit F2, and I'm going to rename this source, src. And because I have VS Code icons installed, the VS Code extension, it changes that folder to look like a special directory. Now, we're not going to be writing any tests tonight, so I'm just going to nuke the test folder. So I should have source and the name of my project. I try to line it up with my GitHub repo if I can. And you're going to see there's an init.py with version, the special Python reserve name version for 010. Now we can increment this, and we're going to increment this as we go with a poetry command. So it takes care of our version control. Now here is the Toml file, and there's a readme.rst that they create. I'm going to delete this readme.rst that gets created automatically. I'm going to make a quick file called notice, which is what you should do if you're doing GPL3. Copyright John Capobianco 2022. Let's just save that notice. It'll be in my Git repo. Now remember, I'm in a Git repository here, and I'm in the main branch because this is my initial commit. I'm not going to make a branch and merge it in. I'm just going to develop in main here. For all maintenance I do in this project, I'll make a branch, do my maintenance, merge it in, so there's a nice version control over my Python code. Let me clear this off the screen. And so this Toml file, I'm actually going to drag out and make it in the root. And I'm just going to have my init.py in my icicle source folder. All right, and let me just quickly verify that that is accurate based on my other repo. And hey, thanks, Angel. Yeah, 1080p. This is what you get when you get 1 gig up versus 680K up. So Yes, correct. I put that in the root folder along with my notice and my README. And what we're going to do next is update this Toml file. Now this is Toml, and as you can see, it's kind of like YAML, but not really YAML. It's Toml. So we have my author, and the description here is going to be business ready documents from Cisco Identity Services Engine. And thanks for joining, Angel, and thanks for joining Stephen and everybody else that's tuned in. I sort of have my screen hidden now while I update this file. So again, you can see here the version, and this in the Toml will increment automatically, but your init file will not. So I like to keep them in step and update them, you know, this one automatically through the poetry command, and this one automatically through the just manually, excuse me. Okay, so now I have my name of the project, my version, my description, my authors. Now there's going to be a section here called packages that we're going to add. Packages equals, and I'm going to include equals icicle from, because I renamed that folder, I want to specify where to get this from, where my packages are, from source. All right. And I didn't screw that up anyway. Yes, I did. This doesn't belong here. Okay. Yeah. And then the README I'm going to specify is not the default RST, but my own .readme file. Now, we're not quite done here, and you're going to see poetry dependencies. I'm just going to downshift this to 3.8 Python as opposed to 3.10, and then you wouldn't be able to pip install it if you're not running 3.10. So I'll backdate this to 3.8. But in this section, and this is what I love about poetry, these are the dependencies for my package that I'm building. So if I add XML to Dick, or Google Text-to-Speech, or the request library, or PyETS, or Ansible, whatever I'm building my project on, we say poetry add, and it will do the pip install into your virtual environment and add it as a dependency here. You could also fill this out manually if you know specific versions or specific commands that you need in your dependencies. You can do that there. Now, I could probably write, this is for the test, the dev dependencies, and this is the build system. So now I'm going to add a section here because I want this to be a script that people can run. So I'm going to say tool poetry dot scripts, and I'm going to say icicle equals, and then I'm going to call this icicle dot script run. Now I'm going to save this file, Toml file, and I'm going to get out of the file because I don't want to be in here and it try to write to it and then write. So we're going to close that, but we'll revisit it after I've added some packages that we need. Now you can see I made a script, reference to a script. So along with our init file, we're going to make a script file, script.py. And this is going to be a very simple file, but it is an important file. And we're going to say from.icicle, which doesn't exist yet. We haven't created this file yet. And you can see it throws an error because it can't find it. Import the CLI. We're going to define a run function that calls CLI. And that's all we need in here. And this warning will go away after we make our main file, which is going to be called icicle.py. All right, so now you can see my error is gone from my script. Now we're going to get into the Python, and let me just check something real quick. So there's going to be some packages or some import statements that we need, and we'll call them out as we go. But we're going to use the system, so sys, mainly for file path resolutions, things of that nature. So we're going to import system. We definitely need JSON. And we definitely need requests, which is what the requests library, Python's way of sending an HTTP GET request against the RESTful APIs. So now what we're going to do is say poetry add requests. Oh, because I'm not in the Toml file. Hang on, I need to go cd source cd icicle poetry add requests. Invalid Toml file path. Did I miss something in my Toml file? Is my include icicle from source? Oh, hang on. Maybe it's a pathing issue. No. Little hiccup here with pathing. Source icicle Toml. Invalid Toml file control characters are not allowed. Use strings. So there's line 10. Oh, I didn't close my, it's right there in front of me. Always read the error codes. I didn't close something. There we go. Okay, excuse me for the hiccup. But poetry add requests, and as you can see, now requests is part of my dependencies. So when you pip install this, it will include my code and the requests installation. That's the whole kind of idea behind poetry, or one of the major pluses. So again, we just say poetry add and then the library that we need. And excuse me, I didn't close off my quotation here. That was the mistake. Okay, so now that we have requests, let's take a look at the other packages that we're going to need before we start writing some Python. And thanks, Angel. Yeah, I found it. It was the close. So now we need rich click, and I showed you the Git repository, and we just import rich click as click. We're going to give it an alias of just click, but it's rich click is the poetry add rich click, and it will pull that in. And if we check the Toml file, we now have the rich click as a dependency. Now there's a few more that we're going to need. We're going to import YAML, which I do not need to pip install. We're going to say from path lib import path to help us with our paths to files. And we're going to do from rich, so not rich click, but more like the parent rich, the actual app, to make our output easy to and nice and colorful on the screen. Import. So we're going to want print JSON, because I like to print the JSON payload, similar to how Postman does it or curl does it. I like to just dump the payload of the JSON to the user's screen, regardless of if they're making files or not, just so that's there in case they just want that data and use this as their Python, as their Postman or request library. So I always dump that in rich JSON. And we're also going to, I don't need console yet. I might make an SVG of this later, but so right now I don't need the rich console. And we're going to also import Jinja2. And before I forget, let's add just rich. And let's add Jinja2. And from Jinja2, I need the environment, and I need the file system loader. And we'll get to, well, let me just do it now. From GTTS, which is Google Text to Speech, import GTTS. And we'll use that a little bit later. That'll be the last file that we make. And we want GTTS. So far so good. There is another library that we need. And let me quickly shift gears to this repository. We need, there's a couple of others that we're going to want. So we're going to import XML to dict, and I'll tell you why. And we're going to pip install this. XML is, in my opinion, it's a totally fine format. It's very verbose. It's tagged, so it's like HTML tags. Everything is tagged. But I want a dictionary. I want JavaScript is really what I want. So it's kind of a throwback to SOAP and kind of the pre-REST APIs, or around the same time they sort of came out, where we had SOAP APIs and now we have RESTful APIs. I like to work with RESTful APIs, but the MNT API system is XML. So we're going to use this XML to dictionary to transform it in kind of an extra little step to let me work with JavaScript representation, JavaScript object notation, representation of the MNT APIs. We're also going to import, because the certificates aren't secure and I don't want warnings, we're going to import URL lib3. And right away, the first thing I'm going to write is URL lib3 dot disable warnings. So, and I'll tell you where I learned this from, 2 different places. When I submitted some ISE code to the Cisco Automation Exchange, one of the exchanges I had during my submission was, can you get rid of these warnings? And they sort of pointed me to this library. And then one of my colleagues in one of our boot camps, they use this because we use self-signed certificates. So I've seen this. This is a good way to handle self-signed certificates if you don't want the noise of error messages about those self-signed certificates. So now I like to comment, and we're going to say Jinja2 setup and templates, and we're going to make a template directory, template dir equals, and we're going to say path file dot resolve dot parent to resolve the parent directory, because I'm going to put the templates in the same folder as this script. So that's going to be used by Jinja later on, is where to find the templates that we're going to make. And we're going to set up an environment variable, which is loader equals, and then we're going to call that file system loader and call that template directory. So now I have an env variable, which is the environment variable of that template directory. So I'm going to call that later in the code. Let me import, well, I guess I don't really need that because I'm not using, okay. So let me switch repos real quick and call up this screen. Sorry, I'm just trying to juggle a couple things here. So let's set up our click system first. So I'm gonna go to the bottom, what will be the bottom of this file. Well, let me share this on, let me quickly share that I've gone live on YouTube. I haven't done that yet. All right, sorry, I didn't share that I actually gone live yet. So let me call up my code. And let me go all the way to the bottom of my code. Like I said, I don't want to copy paste it raw because it kind of, we missed me being able to talk about it. But what I'm going to do is, remember how we called this script CLI here? How we defined at runtime, call the CLI from icicle? So this is the first thing we're going to write, and it usually goes at the bottom of the file, so I'm going to pad it with some space here. And I'm going to say define CLI, define CLI, and then inside of the brackets, which I'm going to drop down. Okay, so the idea here is that users can pass in a series of things and get data back from the API. So what are those things that we need to send the API, that we need to capture from the user? So first of all, we're going to need the URL of ISE, the ISE, right, the endpoint where we're pointing this command to. We're going to need the username let me just check and make sure that this is correct. I think it's just URL, username, password for ISE once you turn on the ERS system. Yep, that's right. So we need the username, the password, and what else? Well, the API they want. So we're going to call that API. And I'm going to close this off here. And what we're going to do is, why doesn't it like that? Because I haven't called them yet, maybe? Yeah, I don't know. It doesn't like this right now. So what we're going to do is, whoops, do this. Yeah, that's right. And invoke the class, and we have to define this class. We'll just call this ISE with a capital I. And that is going to take in the URL, the username, and as you can see, as I type these in, they light up in a happy color up here. They're not faded because they've been referenced. The password and the URL, or the API. And we're going to then invoke the class.ISE and here we're going to say if name special Python reservation equals main, run the CLI. So if it's run from main, then invoke that CLI. So now we have to create this Icicle class and the functions inside that class. So we're going to move up here. I'm going to just check my reference code real quick. Right, so after we define that stuff, we're going to say main class Icicle takes URL, username, password, and the API. Okay, so class Icicle, and here we're going to say define init. So we want to initialize this class, which takes in self, URL, username, password, and the API. And we're going to say self.url equals URL, self.username equals username, self.password equals password, self.api equals API. Now, no, I'll do that another way. So one thing we have to keep in the back of our minds is that we do have to invoke this XML to DIC, and we have to find a way to identify which ones are XML APIs and which ones are just JSON. So now that we've defined that, we're going to write some functions in here to do the work for us. So let me just check. Right, so what we're going to say is define, and this is be lowercase Icicle with a self, and we're going to say, right, we're going to do parsed JSON equals JSON dump string, and we're going to say self dot capture state. Let me collapse this so I can see this a little better. And what we're going to do is indent that JSON by 4, and we want to sort the keys. That should be true. Okay, so we're just going to call that and then hand off, and we're going to say if self.fileType does not equal none. We're going to make that the default. So if the self, if they don't want a file type, if they just want to print it to the screen, or if that's not true, if they want a file type, we're going to say self.pick file type and pass that the parsed JSON. Else, we're going to print JSON and that parsed JSON. Now we're going to edit this a little bit later just to handle if they want all the APIs. But for now, let's start there. We'll get to all as if we have time for the last sort of use case. So now what we want to do is define that capture state. So define capture state. I keep doing that, which is self. And we're going to say if self.api equals, and here's what we're going to do. We're going to let the user say, let's just say version. So if the self.api is version, let me put that in quotes, then the URL equals an F string, a formatted string, where we can work with a variable, which is going to be self.url, meaning the base ISE URL that they want to resolve to, or the IP address, right? Hey, it's DevNet Dan. Hey, Dan, thanks for joining, man. Appreciate your support. Thanks for joining. I got going a little early. You know me, I just couldn't wait to get going here. So we're just at the point where we're checking the what the user is going to send in for the API they want. And we're going to have to resolve what they type to the API. So instead of making them type in the whole API, we can just let them use keywords here. So that's the first half of our URL, is the URL they pass in. And now I just have to quickly check what the version APIs is from my previous code. Version, ISE version. Okay, so this is at admin API MNT version. Yeah, I'm overriding the URL here. So I'm just trying to see what the best, I'm looking at my other code and I do it a little bit differently here. Because I'm just capturing the state here. No, that's how I do it. All right, so we'll just leave it like that for now. This if statement to capture the state of that path, and we're just updating the path with what the user passed into us. And then what we're going to do is we're going to add an else here to handle all paths that are not captured. So we're just going to print that out to the screen with click, which is rich click, so we can actually send things with an S echo. And we can say to the user, the self.api is not a supported API. Please check the README. And in the README, we'll make a list of what we map the short code to the API is. All right, so then that'll handle most use cases, right? Check what they've sent us, and do we have a template for that? Otherwise, just print out an error to the user. So now what we're going to do is say payload. I don't need a payload in this one. So our headers, let's define our headers here, is going to be accept, right, application. So no, I don't want to accept that one because it's going to be XML. So right, I don't have to do this. Right, okay, I'm sorry. I'm mixing up my APIs here. This ISE is actually a little easier. So I just, here I'm going to say version equals request dot request, and I'm going to get, and I'm going to use that URL, and I'm going to say auth equals self.username, self.password, and I'm going to say verify equals false because this is a self-signed certificate. Now here is the part where we're going to parse with XML what that payload is. So that payload inversion as of line 52 is going to be an XML payload from this API. So what we want to do is let's just call this XML parse equals XML to dict dot parse version dot text. So the text payload, because we're using requests library, so I can use the dot text here to get the text of that payload into the new variable XML parse. And we're going to call this version JSON equals JSON load string, JSON dump the string from XML parse. Now, what I want to do is handle this to say if version JSON is not none, right? If it's not empty, then we're going to make a variable that's going to hold our templated output. So version template equals, and this is where we call that environment. Remember, environment is holding our Jinja2 path. So environment, and we're going to invoke the .get template, and we're going to call this ISE version .j2, excuse me. So let's do this as we go along. We're going to make a new file called ISE version.j2. That's a Jinja2 template. I love my Jinja2. Now, what are we going to do with this template? Well, we're going to render it. So what we're going to do is say parsed, I'm going to call this templated output equals, and now we're going to call that version template dot render from Jinja2, and we're going to say just version equals version JSON. Now this is our opportunity to pass things into the Jinja template. So I'd like my Jinja template to know, actually I'm going to change this from ISE version to ISE CSV. Hang on a second. What kind of file type did I pick here? File type none. Self.picked. See, print parse JSON. So I need to, that's what I'm actually should be doing, is doing this up here. So hang on. I'm going to copy this real quick. And print version JSON. Excuse me. Sorry, I missed the step there. I lost track. And the file type here that I picked is not none. Pick file type. And I skipped my pick file type code. I moved right into capture state Yeah, I see what I've done. Ha, I jumped a step. I need to handle this pick file type before I move any further because I'm going to forget about it. Well, no, I guess I can finish the capture state. Let me finish my train of thought. I do need this pick file type. I just didn't write it in that order. But let's just finish the capture state for now. Capture state, parse JSON, and actually this should be there. Yeah, load that, parse JSON. Aha, no, I'm ahead of myself here. I need to handle, I've gotten out of track here. Let me just undo this. I need to return that parse JSON first. So we're going to capture the state and then parse JSON. Yeah, I'm second guessing myself here. We don't need to do any of that. Where I was at was the API equals self.api. Because I want my template to know which API it's handling it. So then I guess I know I want to do it the wrong way. I'm doing that the wrong way. This is going to be ISE version. So, right, because I've already passed it if it equals version. Need to move this up. Yeah, sorry, hey Ricardo, thanks for joining. I think YouTube automatically will dump this under my YouTube channel once we're all done here. Let me sign out of WebEx. So if it equals MNT version, I need this somewhere else. This if version is not none. I don't do it that way in my code. So just not used to handling the XML to print it on the screen. So capture the state. If it equals version, let me move this stuff in here. Yeah, all right, whoops. Sorry, a little out of track here, a little out of sorts because of this stupid XML. So back to where I was here, right? So I'm passing in to this ISE version the API. I don't need the API, I need the file type here. I guess I could do it by file type. Let me do it that way. File type equals self dot file type, which reminds me, I didn't include that in the things they're passing. So let me add that real quick. That's kind of important, is the file type the user wants. So self dot file type equals file type, and I need to add it here and here as well. File type, file type. Right, that's why this wasn't making sense. So, right, pick the file type. It's not equal none. Self pick file type dot parse JSON, else print the parse JSON. And I'm handling the else right now, and I'll work on the file type after. So capture state, if it is version, that's the URL. Go get the version, XML parse it. If it's not none, see, this is where I don't need the meta, so I don't need to template it here. And I want to make this parsed JSON, and that's what I want to return. Right, so if they don't pick a file type, go ahead and check the API, go get the data, parse it, and return the parsed JSON. So let's try this. And I just need my ISE API. Oh, hang on, I'm not quite done. I'm not quite done. We need to make the rich click interactive part. Okay, so far, and this is sort of my iteration, is just go. So I want to handle this edge case of just printing it to the screen, and that's a good place to start. Let's see if I can print that XML data. So I'm getting a phone call here. Hello? Hi, I'm streaming. Yes, I did. Before I started. Okay, bye. So, sorry about that. Live streaming, and my wife's out of town, which thank you for spending the evening with me because I'd be pretty bored otherwise. So, let's handle no file type. They just press enter and want it on the screen. So now I need to capture these, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 inputs from the user at the command line. So I'm going to do that next, and let me reference my working code. And this should go a lot smoother now that I'm on the right track here. So what we're going to do is say at click.command, and that's going to then let us do options for the command. So we're going to say click dot, and remember this is command, meaning the user can pip install this and then just say icicle, enter, and then get what options. Well, these are the options we're going to define. So click dot option, and this is going to be URL. Now these should be in the same order as we've defined them because that's got to match up the input. And we're going to give this a prompt of ISE URL. We're going to give it a help of Cisco Identity Services Engine URL. We're going to make this required, and we're going to give it an environment variable, which is going to make this really easy for our users who do this repetitively. Okay, so now I'm basically going to copy this for each one of my defined things, right? So username, ISE username, username. Hey Liam, thanks for the feedback about the quality. I've had a 1080p camera and this external microphone for forever, but the fiber's here. Thanks for joining. Let me just give you a quick thank you for joining. Thank you for joining. Wow, we got 9 people watching. Thanks for joining. If you want to drop where you are from around the world, hey, it's Matt. Hey, Matt. And, just say hey to everybody. And I'm coming off a great week at Cisco Live. I'm really inspired by meeting Catherine, the Ice Queen, as we affectionately know her as in the community. McNamara, she really helped me on my journey doing things like this, videos and content, and I cannot say enough about her. She helped me at the Meet the Engineers, my first Meet the Engineer at Cisco Live. So just really kind. She was introduced to me earlier the night before as Katie by someone more familiar to her than me, and it didn't click in my head until maybe 10 minutes later. I went, hey, that was Catherine. I need to get a selfie. And so I let her know on Twitter, and we actually happened to just by happenstance both be meeting engineer meetings, and she gave me a little bit of time, and we got a selfie. And so I'm going to hopefully show her this at the end. And hey, it's Oscar. Hey, thanks. Hey, Oscar. Thanks for joining. So I don't know how late or early everyone got here. We're working with REST APIs. We're working with Poetry to get this on PyPy. We're working with Rich Click, which is what I'm doing right now. And so we're going to make all these environment variables so that they're nice and easy for our users. And I'm going to set these environment variables to make my development work easy too. So this one's going to be password, which we can actually hide. Password. Whoops, make all that all caps, password, and we're going to add an extra flag that says hide input equals true, so that the password doesn't show on the screen when we type it. Always, shift left, develop with security in mind, and we're going to call this one, so what were we at? URL, username, password, API, ISE API. Now actually I'm going to put in this help, right, for a list of API shortcodes. Check the README. Something like this. And this one, we're not going to give this one an environment variable. So the user has to type in the API they want. I don't see a reason for making that an environment variable. And then the file type is the file type for a list of file types. See the README. Check the README. And we're going to give this one a default. Right, so the default file type is going to be none. We're going to make the user type in a file type. And that way, if it is none, and did I capitalize that in my Python up above? If it does not equal none. Okay, so this is the trigger here. If they just press enter and don't type in a file type, just make the default none. I could also put a list in here. Let's do that. Let's give them choices. So we're going to say type equals click dot choice, and we're going to say an array, so none, JSON, YAML. Oh, these have to be in quotes. Sorry, excuse me. JSON, YAML, CSV, HTML, Markdown, mind map, MP3, and let's just add all, and we'll get to all later, maybe not tonight, I don't know. All is just easy, it's not an important one for me right now. So those are the file type options. The API, now there's just so many APIs, I don't want to give them the choice, it would make it useless. So let's test this with saying, let me bring this up on the screen. I'm going to say Python 3 icicle -- help. Let's see what our help looks like. Oh, I got a typo here. No module name, MS. What am I missing here? MSI lib. Sorry, that's a little bit anticlimactic. What did I get wrong here? I'm just checking my syntax of everything. Required is true, comma, comma, comma. Oh, hang on. MSI lib. Where did that come from? That's wrong. Import file. Pathlib, that should be pathlib. I don't know where that came from. That's an autocomplete on me. Sorry, that was a pathlib? Import path. I don't know where it's getting this .schema from. I already have. Sorry, I'm not sure where that came from. I didn't type that in. Let's try that again. Import lib metadata. Where is it getting these things from? Sorry, that's weird. I don't know where it picked those two files up from. Oh, do I have to? So I missed YAML. So poetry install, poetry add YAML. Import YAML. Why is it not liking YAML? Module name YAML. I don't think I have to import YAML. Why is it complaining about YAML? YAML is not accessible. Well, this is strange. I don't think it's something you have to pip install. PyYAML. Poetry add PyYAML. There we go. Sorry about that, everyone. Toml File YAML. Okay, good. All right. All right, let's try this again with the help. Environment unexpected keyword load. This one sounds familiar too. Let me just quickly check something, how I do it here. Let me just take that out for now. I'm not using a template right now anyway. I will come back to the Ginger template and handle that a bit different. Okay, there we are. All right, a couple little hiccups. But so anyway, the whole point of these help inside of our click options, our rich click options, is to give the user a dash help. So now they have help, right? And then the options, they can pass it, include URL in the order, URL, username, password, API, file type. And you can see there's the list of file types they can select, and that these are all text. And you can see that they're all required. All right, so now if I just do pipeline, I should be asked 3 questions here. So what's the ISE URL? Let me bring this up. And let's go get our ISE URL. And we're not going to take it, we're going to take it from there. Let me see how I've handled the path where I put my slash. So slash admin, right. So then what they want to paste in is just the ISE URL, no slash. The username in this case is admin. The password, which you're not going to see because I've hidden it, is C1 SCO12345, I believe. And we want the version API, and we want none, which I can just press enter. I spelled indent wrong, so which means I've got to do all that over again. But I don't. What we're going to do next time, so I don't have to keep typing all that in. Where's my indent? It's in, yeah. Okay, so let's set up our environment variables. So we're going to clear the screen, and we're going to say export URL equals, we're going to say export username equals admin, export password equals, and then let's try it again. And we want the version API. Notice how I wasn't prompted for anything. I've set it as an environment variable. And no file type. Object is not JSON serializable. Okay, so I'm close. Let me just... So... line... So that doesn't like the JSON dumps of the capture. Oh, I see. It should though, because it is JSON. Or is it because I'm already loading it? Let's just try to capture the state. And see what this looks like. Although that should have worked, I thought. Version. None. Let's see here. So version none. Okay, so we are getting data back, I believe. Version none. Let me just check something really quickly. Did I just miss that? Maybe? Yeah. Okay, ha, success. So anyway, I missed making this call the capture state function. So it wasn't actually triggering any of this code. All right, so now what we've achieved is being able to use environment variables, and we can run the Python icicle and say the version API in no file type, and we get the JavaScript object notation. Round of applause, everybody, big clap. That's XML in the, I'll show you, let me launch Postman. This is what we actually get from this API, is this, XML. No bueno, we don't want XML. I don't want that. We want this, right? We want, hey, Nicholas, thanks for joining. Thanks for the big round of applause, everybody. Hey, Nick. Okay, so now what? Now what? So let's do the obvious thing and make the JSON file from this, which is really just saying if the user types JSON. So what we need to do now, and let me just check my code real quick. We capture the state, and we return that payload, and it's being printed. So now what we need to do is make this pick file type. Okay, so now we're going to define pick file type, and what do I pass this? Is this just self? Let me just quickly check. So I pass this self and the parsed JSON, and I'm going to say if self dot file type equals none. We have to handle the none, right? We're just going to say pass. Else if self dot file type equals JSON. Okay, now we're cooking. Now I know where I'm at. We're going to say self dot JSON file, passing that the parsed JSON, and then we'll just keep crawling through our file types. So now for this, I need to define JSON file, and I'm going to make this self and parsed JSON, and we're going to say with open, make this an F string. I always seem to do that. That says self.api, let's name the file, the API they called, .json. And now to finish this, I need to write this, I need to close that quote, and then I need to write it, and I'm just going to say as f, as file, f.write parsed JSON. I think that's all I really need to do. Sorry, my cursor jumped on me. So, actually, let's do this. Let's tell the user where the file can be found. Click.secho. We're going to say JSON file created at, and this is where I'm calling that system argument, system path 0. As a variable in the inside of the formatted string slash self.api dot JSON, and I'm going to make that green because it was successful. And I need to finish my quote here. And now let's try this. Okay, and this is how we just crawl along. Clear my screen and run Icicle. Oh, I forgot a... I knew that didn't look right. Is it a comma that I'm missing here? Yeah, I knew it. I need a comma here to make that a... Yeah, sorry, excuse me. So version, and we're going to say JSON file, and I've printed it to the screen. I don't know why the print didn't look as pretty here. And I've told the user where to find the file, and there is the JSON file. Right? So now I actually am a step better than Postman because I actually just get the file. Like, how easy is that? The API you want, the file type you want. Boom, there's a JSON file. Now let's make it a YAML file because some people like YAML files. So, and it's a nice dictionary actually, YAML. So don't dismiss YAML as a nice dictionary intent that is arguably easier to read as a human than this. I like working with JSON versus working with YAML, but if I want to just read something like this, it might be nice as a YAML file. So, right, we just have to come into our else if self.file type equals YAML. I'm going to call self YAML file, passing it the parse JSON. And we're more or less going to copy this JSON function. And we're going to change this to be a YAML file. And I'm going to quickly... No, it's not unknown waters. All of this is smooth sailing. Honestly, like I have all of this mapped out. It's not going to take us very long to get to the templating stuff. I do 2 files without Jinja templates, the JSON and the YAML. The very next thing I'm doing will be a comma separated file. And so YAML, we're going to just do this. We're going to say clean YAML, I guess. And we're going to YAML dump the JSON loads of parsed JSON. And we're going to say default flow style. And you have some options here, but I like default flow style is false. And then what we're going to do is say, whoops, we're going to just basically change that with open statement. So with open dot YAML, passing it the clean YAML, and we're going to say YAML file created at, and where am I? Let me just quickly, oh, I see there. I don't want to print that. I want to print. Let's add that there. Okay, so now it's going to print the YAML on the screen. So version as a YAML file should print the JSON version of the payload and create a YAML file. So if we look at the YAML file, right, product, which I can collapse as an @name of Cisco Identity Services Engine, type of node 2, and the version from the MNT XML. So now we've gone XML to YAML. Pretty neat stuff, right? So now let's get into the Jinja templating. So the next file type is going to be CSV, else if self.file type parse JSON, oops, geez, if, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself here, equals CSV. I'm going to say self.csv file parse JSON. And let's do our CSV file. Now there is CSV libraries. You can use pandas. I've done CSVs a few ways. My happiest most successful way is to just make it myself with a Jinja template. So CSV file self parsed JSON. Okay, now here's where we're going to call in those template directories. Hopefully I don't get a problem here. Template dir equals path file, the special keyword, dot resolve dot parent, and then we want to set up env equals environment loader equals file system loader string. That's my mistake. Okay, let me finish this code and then I'll talk about this. The error I was getting before, it's a Jinja 2 thing, and it didn't always work that way. But now when you're using loader here, it has to be the string of this template directory, not just the template directory. So watch for that. And something is not quite correct here. Loader string. I need one more of these, right? Yep. Okay, so now that I've loaded that up, I'm going to say CSV template equals environment. Actually, I'm just going to call this version. See, I want to pass it. Yeah, I'm going to switch this again. So I'm going to call this ISE CSV instead of ISE version, and you'll see why in a second. So what I want to do now is make it just an agnostic CSV template that handles all CSV templating for all of the APIs. So we're going to say get template, and this is I'm just going to say ISE CSV.j2, close that off. And we're going to say CSV output equals the CSV template dot render, and here's where we're going to render, and I'm going to pass it in the API equals self.api, so we know what API we're templating. I'm going to drop this down and move it over, and say the data to template equals parsed JSON. Do I need to pass it anything else? Actually, what I need to do here is say JSON load string parse JSON. Now I could pass it in other things. I could pass it in the URL. I could pass it in arbitrary messages. But what I'm going to pass the template is the API, and then you'll see why in the template I'll just evaluate if API equals version, use the version template. And the data to template I'm going to reference is the JSON payload that we have in this JSON file. So then what I want to do after that is do my file saving stuff. There's no reason to rewrite this. I'm going to copy this and say with open CSV, and what I'm going to pass that is the CSV output. And I'm going to say CSV file created at CSV. All right, so now our stage is set to split our screen with our JSON and make our Jinja 2 template. And I'm just going to cheat. It's not so much cheating, I'm just going to take a look here. And yeah, so now Jinja 2 uses mustaches and % signs to represent logic. And it uses double mustaches to represent variables, of which we have API and data to template. So what we're going to say is if API equals version, I'm going to close this, and actually I'm going to put a line here, and if it equals version, what we want is product name, type of node, version as the header row. And then we're going to make another row that has data to template dot product dot, can I do at name? I don't know if it likes this at name. Hang on, how did I do this? Just give me 1 second. I think I have to handle that at symbol. So anyway, how's everybody doing out there? Thanks for joining me. I hope you're finding this, entertaining / educational, edutaining-cational. Nice version. Aha. So what I need to do here is just square into it here. So let me change the whole structure here. So it's like that. Product at name. Because of this silly at symbol here. And again, that's just a carryover from the XML. So then data to template dot product dot type of node, and then data to template dot product dot version, and that's it. That is a CSV Jinja 2 template and how I map it from the JSON payload. And we can do for loops and other things in this, if not, if, greater than, whatever, right? Now I could even have this with some logic, well, not in this CSV file, but in HTML and other formats we can do some pretty neat things here. So now let's run the code. And again, because I have environment variables, I just need to say version and CSV, unexpected character at line 89. Do I have to put that inside of quotes? Yes, I do. Sorry. Right, it's that stupid at sign. Version, CSV, bang. So dumps the JSON to the screen, nice and convenient for the user. And here is the CSV file. Now with VS Code, I can turn on my Excel preview, and now I have my version as a CSV file, which isn't as impressive, but we can do the same repeatable technique with, other APIs, which we're going to do. So I'm going to write one example of each of the APIs and each of the file types, and then what I'm probably going to do is spin up my other repository and just start copying and pasting things in for expediency. Does anyone have any questions out there so far? Just let me know. I am monitoring the chat, and thank you all for joining me. And if there are questions, I'm happy to interrupt my flow here. It's pretty straightforward from here on out. Now, what I'm going to show you is now that we've done a CSV file, what we're going to do is we're going to kind of jump around the order of the files. We're going to make a markdown file next, just markdown. So what I need is a new template. I'm going to say ismd.j2. And I'm going to just take this code from my CSV. And what I'm going to do is do a file find on commas. So first, before I do that, I'm going to make a header row that says, let me just make sure I'm not doing this wrong. I'm going to make a header row like this that says ICE MNT version. I'm going to put a pipe at the front and a pipe at the end, padded with spaces. All right, and then I'm going to do the same on my data row. And then I'm going to find all the commas, and provided I'm not doing any replace statements, which will have a comma, I want to highlight that. If you're using this technique, if you're using pipe replace inside of a variable, you're likely to have commas, where you can't just blanket find and replace. The comma with a space, pipe space, right? Place all, save this file, go back into our Python, and copy, right? We need to add our logic out here that says else if self.file type equals, do I say MD or markdown? I believe I say markdown. MD. Let me change this to markdown. So if it equals markdown, right, what do? We call self dot. Oh yeah, so it's white space control, Oscar. Absolutely correct. I'll come back to that when I go back to the Jinja 2. So what Oscar wants to know is, why do I put this single hyphen here? It will strip white space. So this empty row, instead of being an empty row, even though I have an empty row, let me fix the empty row. So what I'm going to do is, in the CSV file, CSV template, excuse me, I'm just going to back that up to be on the first line, but it is white space control. So let me just rerun this and regenerate that CSV file. Oh, I haven't finished my self dot markdown file, parse JSON, and then we're just going to copy the CSV file. It's honestly the same code, and we're going to say markdown template, change this to markdown output, and this becomes markdown file. And let me do the same thing here, and we're going to run this and say version markdown has no attribute markdown file. Oh, I need to change the name of the function, markdown file. Version markdown, bang. And now we have, oh, I didn't change the file type. Whoops, I just overwrote the CSV file, .md. Let me do this again, and here, md. Excuse me, let me redo the CSV file. And then run this again and do version markdown. And now we have a markdown file. And if I preview the markdown, we have a nice table. Hang on, that's not right. Here, MD. I called the wrong template. Version markdown. There we go. So now we have this nice markdown file that will render. Oh, I've got an extra pipe somewhere. It's not quite rendering properly over here. It should be a nice table. 2, 3, 4. Unless it's the preview. Unless the preview is screwed up from the CSV file, it could be cached. Let me just check the markdown. That should be right. I don't like the way that's rendering. That's not quite rendering the way it should. It should be nice tables. It's like it's all on one line. Is that what's happening? Yeah. Why is that? Let me check 1 second here. I don't like the way that's rendering it. Usually it should be a lot easier. I think I'm overthinking this somehow. Let me just check my markdown. Oh, aha, I missed something. I missed something entirely. I'm sorry. Okay, so in markdown, yeah, I need the delimiter. So to make this valid markdown, that's why it's doing exactly what I told it to do. I need a delimiter row. So that's the only thing different from a CSV. We replace the commas with pipes, leading pipe, trailing pipe. You can add a pound symbol for a title, and then you need a delimiter that matches. So now when I run this, version markdown, I have a nice table. There we go. All right, figured it out. So now this actually renders this way on Markdown, or on GitHub, or GitLabs, or browser-based repositories. this will render as a nice table for your MNT version. Again, from XML to JSON to Jinja 2 template. Now let's get into something a little more cool. And I think I am going to steal some code. So what we're going to do is make a new file called header.j2 and a new file called footer.j2. And these are going to be header and footer files for datatables.net. Now let me go there and show you that real quick. Datatables.net. So they tell you very easily, add advanced interaction controls to your HTML tables the free and easy way. You include some header files, they include these two files, and then call this function as a footer, and you get something like this, a paginated, searchable, sortable, right, pages of HTML. So it turns your HTML into HTML on steroids. But I'm not going to write all my code. I have a lot of headers. I've kind of got a nice little formula for this. And then we're going to need a new file called ISE HTML.j2. And that's going to be our main HTML. So what I'm going to do is take the CSV file again, my universal CSV file, and copy that and put it into my HTML page. I will come back to this, but let me launch another repo real quick. Just to steal my header and footer code. I just don't want to write all of this from scratch. And it took me a long time to work out this format. And I'll explain it in a second. So that's my header. I'll come back to these in just a second. I just want to steal this code from, there's no such thing as stealing from yourself, right? So what I have is a header file. And this Jinja 2 template is going to call, import that header from, and actually let me just change these titles to be data table header and data table footer. All right, so now in the header, I have my HTML, my header section, and I call in these scripts, which I got from datatables.net. Some of them do different things, like a PDF button or a print button, or column visibility, just different functions. And then all of my style sheets that I want to import. I could include my own style sheets as well. And then I open up my body for my HTML page. So I'm going to save that file and close it. And then my footer is an extensive JavaScript that I wrote with the help of the datatables.net that gave me a lot of this code that has like column reorder is true. Select a column is true. A fixed header is true. So this is JavaScript, and I call the three main points are the data table, and the data table, which invoke my HTML table, which I'm going to show you how to call it as a data table. That's the identifier of my table. Now I use the universal data table label here, so that way every table I make in my HTML Jinja template here is always going to be called data table for each of my APIs, so that this is a universal function. So save and close. And now we're going to write some HTML. And it's Jinja templating of HTML. But let me quickly just call up my code here. So what we're going to do in the Jinja 2, after, actually at the top here, we're going to import data table header. So not import, include the data table header outside of every one of these tables that we're going to make. And then at the footer, outside of my if statement, so regardless of whatever API it's called, we're going to include data table footer. Now we just have to make HTML. So what we're going to do is have h1 that says ISE version, close that, and then we're going to have a table ID equals data table. This is that where that linkage to our JavaScript, and then we're going to have a table header, table heads, excuse me, the table row, close the table row, close the table head, open up a table body, start another row, close that row, close the body, close the table. Yeah, okay, so now we just make that a table header. And here's what I'd like to do is to find, replace, and replace it with the closed header, enter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, a new table header. And I should be able to, I'm off on my spaces. Take those commas from my comma separated and turn them into my table logic, right? And then I have to close the last one. And I'm going to do the same thing here where I'm going to say table, and I'm going to close that right away. And then I'm going to change this to TD, TD, replace, replace. Now I have a data table. Now I go back into my code and I copy my markdown file and I call this HTML file. This is an HTML template, which is HTML output, template, output, save it as an HTML file, and say HTML data table file created at HTML. Let's spin the wheel and see what happens. Clear the screen, run my code. Version, HTML, should have an HTML page. Now what I'm going to show you is there's an extension called Open in Default Browser. Oh, did I not save it as HTML? I think I missed something. Did I not write my, yeah, right, this would help. Else if self dot file type equals HTML, self dot HTML file parse JSON. Let's try that again. Version HTML, data table header is undefined. Did I not? Yeah, I need to put that in quotes. Sorry, I got my includes wrong. .j2. Sorry about that. Clear, run the code, version, HTML. There's my HTML page. So this is what it looks like. This is the HTML, the underlying HTML. Now let's open it in the browser. And again, this Open in Default Browser is a VS Code extension. And there we go. And if there was more than one, I could sort them. I could, like, this is really neat. I can make a CSV file right from the browser of that file. I didn't technically need to template that. I could have just relied on the data table. I could send this to my printer. There's my printer spawning. How do I cancel this? And then PDF, if I want this as a PDF. There we go. It has pagination if there was more than 10 records. I can show all rows, 10, 25, 50 rows. I can pick the columns that I want to have visible. I can reorder the columns if I want version here in the middle. I can search for, let's, like 3.1.0, but obviously it's going to find it. I can click and highlight the row. Right, so that's datatables.net. Does anybody have any questions? I'm just going to check the YouTube real quick. Still got 6 people tuned in. Thanks for sticking around. I hope you're having a good time. So that's datatables.net, HTML from the JSON. And so now let's do another file type. And what would be the next file type? So we've done JSON, YAML, CSV, HTML, Markdown, mind map. All right, this is sort of what I've become known for, these mind maps. Let's make the mind map. So else if self.fileType equals mind map, self.mind map file, parse JSON. So now what we're going to do is take the HTML, right, and just make our new function called mindMap file. Change this to mindMap. Change this to mindMap. Change this to .md for Markdown. Change the template name to mindMap. And send the mindMap output and say mindMap file created at MD. Now, again, I reuse my code. So what I'm going to do is take as little as I can from my HTML work. Okay, so I'm just going to copy, this section of HTML. I'm going to make my new template file, so ISE mindmap.j2. I'm going to paste that in and just strip out the HTML stuff. And what we can do is do a file find on that and just nuke it on the slash, on the TD, and on the TD. So now to make the mind map, I'm simply going to do this. I'm going to do £1 symbol and call this ISE MNT version API. I'm going to put £2 symbols in front of product name and take the variable. And let's just make this, for the sake of having fun, 3 levels of nodes. So type of node, version, right? Type of node, version, get rid of the white space, save the file, run our code, version, mind map, and I should have, I see what I've done. That's the new mind map. Yeah, I'm gonna have to give it a different file name. So let me run the markdown again to restore that file I just blew away. It's the file name, I just overwrote it. So what I'm going to do is just add space mind map. Version mind map. There we go, version mind map. And if I put my preview on, there is the mind map. Pretty cool, eh? So that's, again, XML to JSON, originally to HTML, now into markmap formatted mind map. So MP3, let's make an MP3 file. This is going to be fun. I haven't shown this yet, how I make the MP3 files, and hopefully it will play over the stream. But it's pretty easy. Honestly, it really is easy. So what we're going to do is, let me go to my code. As I say, it's easy. I just want to check my notes to make sure that I get this right. There's a little more code involved here, but it's well worth the code. So what we're going to do here is say else if self.fileType equals mp3, self.mp3 file type, parse JSON, and we're going to just write this code. We're not going to, actually, I'm going to take some of the code. So yeah, let me just, I'll be doing this a little bit differently, but it's really the same idea. It's really the same idea. So we're going to have this one called mp3 file. mp3 file type. Did I say file or file type? Just file. All right. Don't know where I got file type from. So then what we're going to do is still call the template, and we're going to call the MP3 template the MP3 output. And this is now MP3 template. But we don't need to open the file. We're going to do that a bit different, and we're going to say MP3 file created at MP3. Oh, and I should say this one now says markdown, right? No, mind map. Right, I want to give the user the right file path. Okay, so we haven't used our templated output yet, and we haven't made the template. So what I'm going to do is copy the mind map template and rename it MP3. And we're just going to use this. So what we're going to do is, oh, hang on, my mind map is missing the logic. I got to put the logic in here. Okay, all right, so sorry, back to what I was saying. So I take the mind map file, and I already have everything I need to make an MP3 file. I really do, it's right here in front of us. So this is human speech, so we're going to say the identity services engine monitoring and troubleshooting version API discovered the following version, colon. The product name is, which is a type of node, running, version, whatever. Save that template. And now what we need to do is set our language equals, and we'll just make this US English in the default. And we're going to say MP3 equals Google text-to-speech. The text equals MP3 output. And the language equals language. And then we're going to say mp3.save with an f string of self.api dot, let's call it mp3. Let's just call it .mp3. And then we're echoing it out to the screen. Is everybody ready for this magic? Let's see if we get an MP3 file. Isn't this going to be cool? Hey, Ed. Thanks for joining, Ed. Yeah, I definitely got an upgrade. Sorry, I just saw your message now. So now let's see if we can get this to play. Now, all right, thanks, Steven. Thanks for joining, man. And get a good night's sleep. I appreciate you joining. So let's see if we can make this MP3 file go. Version MP3. Looks like it worked. And let's see if it'll play. And I don't know, maybe you give me a thumbs up if you hear it. I don't know if this is going to play over your...
The Identity Services Engine Monitoring and Troubleshooting Version API discovered the following version. The product name is Cisco Identity Services Engine, which is a type of Node 1 running version 3.1.0.518.
Okay, so that worked. Did everybody hear that? Anyway, pretty neat. So we've done the most difficult AP. So you heard it. Pretty cool, right? Isn't that neat? And again, we could add a language if people type in Japanese or whatever, and then template it in Japanese, and it would say it in Japanese. We won't be doing that tonight. I'm just going to sort of wrap things up. It's I've been going for a little while, and I don't want to drag it on all night for everybody who's tuned in from the beginning. But that's it. So the next steps are, for me, what I'm going to be doing maybe throughout the weekend is moving my existing templates into these CSV files. So I'm going to have else if API equals, and then the other MNT APIs, the ERS APIs, and then the open APIs, the Swagger APIs. The length of the file, I haven't hit a length yet, Nicholas. It's and look at the size of that file, by the way. That's a good question. So it's tiny. It is teeny tiny. It's 68 kilobytes. Now I've done 8 or 9 minute MP3s from Wikipedia pages, and they're 8 or 9 minutes, but even then they're like 3 or 4 megs. So I think it's viable given the short snippets. Now, if you have 1,000, if you did endpoints and you had 30,000 endpoints, you probably don't want that in an MP3 file, right? You probably want it in a CSV file or something better. So what's next? And I'll just highlight what the next steps are. I'm gonna finish the XML APIs. So really the code is all repeatable from this point, except when I say capture state here, I'm going to basically repeat this code with the different MNT APIs. But if they're not MNT APIs, when I get to the external REST service, I won't need this XML parse or to JSON load or dump. I'm just going to get the version, or excuse me, the open API or the ERS API, which will come back as JSON. So I don't need this XML parse step, and I don't need to load it. I'm going to be able to pass the version, parse JSON equals version, and then pass the raw JSON into these other functions. So I want to thank everybody for joining me from all around the world. This should be on my YouTube channel when we wrap it up. I'm glad to hear the quality is it works well. Before we wrap things up, let me finish the poetry exercise before I'm done, because that sort of puts a bow on things. So what I'm going to do is I have to reactivate source identity bin activate cd icicle source icicle. So now what we're going to do is say poetry version major, and now you can see it's bumped my version from 0.1010 to 100. You can also say poetry version patch, which would make this 1.1. So as I add in the rest of my stuff, I'll patch this up to 1.1 or maybe 2.0, I don't know yet. So now in my Toml file, you can see that my version has bumped to 1, but in my init file, I have to update this. So now I'm going to do the poetry steps, which is going to be to say poetry build, poetry, no such file or directory. Oh, I have my README file name wrong. Okay, so it has some safety guardrails. My README is actually called readme.md. Let's try this again. Poetry build. Now it makes the tar file for me and a WHL file. So I have a new folder up here, you'll notice, a distribution folder, and it matches the version of my code. So now I want to publish that, and let me just quickly get my PyPy key. And hopefully it doesn't show the whole key on the screen. I don't think it will. If not, I'll have to regenerate a new key. No, it doesn't show the whole key, so I'm safe. Okay, so now I'm going to say poetry publish, and I'm going to say __ token, because I'm not using a username and password, I'm using a token. It didn't like that. Maybe I didn't get my full token in my copy paste buffer. Yeah, sorry, I missed the full token. And now it's published to PyPy. So now if I go to my PyPy repository, or if we look for icicle on PyPy, there it is. So now let's do it. Let's do it outside of, so what I'm going to do is in my Ubuntu, Python 3mvenv, and I'm going to say dry run, and then I'm going to say source activate, source dry run bin activate, and I'm going to say pip install icicle. And look it's pulling down Google Text-to-Speech, PyYAML, all my requests, Rich, Jinja2, etc. So now, check this out. I can go icicle --help. There's the help. I can say icicle, and I could do --URL and paste in the URL or all that. But let's just do icicle, and let's grab the URL. And again, it's not including the slash, so be careful if you're going to run this at home. The username is admin. There's the password. We're going to use the version API, and let's do an let's do a mind map. Boom, right away. And if I do code from this dry run folder, I should have a mind map file called version mind map. And there we are from start to finish, a rich click poetry powered Python package that you can already start using at home. So that was pretty good for tonight for a couple hours of work. And like I said, I have some homework on my own to patch in all of my other templates into these files. I'm happy to do that. If you want to see me do that, it might not be as exciting as what I've done tonight, but maybe I just turn on the stream and take questions or something. You let me know. You let me know. I hadn't planned on streaming the rest of the work because it's pretty tedious, just copy paste work. I'm not actually writing code. I'm just copying in templates and adding more APIs. But maybe if you want to come hang out with me, we can do that. So I don't know how to gracefully stop my stream, but thank you for joining, and stay safe, everybody. We'll talk to you soon.